worry about indicate that you want to be on the queue. You're automatically on the queue, and I'll just ask you to cede the floor if you don't have any questions. So I'm just going to go through the script here, and then we'll move in camera once we have the vote. So I call this special council meeting of Thursday, March 19th, 2020 to order. This special council meeting is convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw. This special meeting has been called for the purpose of holding an in-camera meeting later today in accordance with Section 14.5 of the Procedure Bylaw. And of course, I want to acknowledge we're on the unceded territories, traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. And I have been in constant contact with the leaders of those three nations, and its early work has really paid dividends in our close coordination with them. So thanks to them. So council is required to meet in camera later this week. The reasons and authority under the Vancouver Charter are listed in the agenda. I'm just going to ask if somebody move the motion. It's going to be very hard to hear people's voices. Would somebody move the motion to go into camera?
I will move it. Adrian here.
You?
Second. Hi, Melissa.
Okay, Melissa, you're on the phone. Thank you very much. All in favor? I'm just going to do yays and nays. All in favor, say yay.
Yay. Yay.
Yay. Yay. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion carries unanimously. So that concludes the item on today's agenda. When we have a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, may we ask a question of parliamentary procedure? Councillor Dominato.
Yes, we don't want too many of these, though, but please go ahead. Are you having difficulty accessing things?
I know it's specifically a question around we have an hour allocated for the in-camera meeting, and if necessary, if we're needed a little bit of extra time, what's the latest we can come back to our public meeting, or what's the means to extend if necessary?
Right now, I'm going to, unless the clerk corrects me, I'm going to say we have as much time as we need in the in-camera session because it is a special council meeting. So we have set times for the public, but we can adjust those if necessary. Is that correct, clerk?
That's correct. We will have to come back here for the 10 o'clock meeting, and if we need to take a recess for the in-camera meeting, we will, and reconvene after.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Point of personal privilege. It's Adrian here.
Sure.
Yes, all of a sudden, I have my laptop open with the desktop all prepared for the meeting as we had originally intended, and I thought we were, but it's now feeding back the sound from this meeting, a bit delayed, which is very disturbing. It's very hard to concentrate. Do I need to keep that open or not?
Clerk?
I can't see the screen to vote anyway.
Through the chair, Councillor Carr, we can connect with you separately. I will get Seth on it right away.
Can I point of privilege in here?
Yes, Councillor Swanson.
Sorry, I still don't have my voting thing up. I guess we don't need that for this section, but if somebody could get there for me, that would be great.
Okay, sure. So I don't have a voting screen either, and so what we can do is we can do vote assist. So don't worry, and there will be no voting in the in-camera session. It's for information only. So we do have time to fix this if need be. But if it doesn't get fixed, we can vote. We can vote with vote assist, and I will go through the roll if that's necessary.
I don't know what vote assist is.
You just tell us, I will call your name, and you tell us whether you're going to vote yes or no. That's it.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions before we adjourn on procedure?
Motion to adjourn? It's okay. Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa. Seconder? Anybody?
Councillor Weave.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Weave. Okay, we'll just do yays and nays. All in favor say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So council is now adjourned. The special council meeting is adjourned, and now we're going to move to the in-camera portion. Clerks, do you need time to set anything up?
We'll need about 5 minutes.
Okay, Council, so just ask you to put your phones on mute and a cup of tea. Good job so far.
Okay, thanks, Council. So we're going to call the special council meeting of Thursday, March 19th, 2020 to order. This is our second special council meeting of the day, so we have to take the roll call. So I'll ask the clerk to do a roll call now.
Mayor Stewart is in the chair. Councillor Carr?
Here.
Councillor DeGenova?
Present.
Councillor Fry?
Here.
Councillor Swanson?
Here.
Councillor Hardwick?
Present.
Councillor Weed?
Present.
Councillor Boyle?
Present.
Councillor Dominato?
Here.
Councillor Bly?
Present.
Councillor Kirby-Young? Councillor Kirby-Young?
Present.
You have quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. And just to repeat, Council, this special council meeting has been called to declare a state of local emergency in accordance with Section 14.5 of the Procedure Bylaw. We have already convened once. We've met in camera, but after in-camera discussions, we've decided that we want to go back in camera for an additional round of questions. So can I have a motion to recess this meeting and so that we can move back into the in-camera portion? I suggest to the public that will probably take about 30 minutes, and then we'll reconvene back here in regular council. So Councillor DeGenova, you've moved. Do we have a seconder?
I've moved. I'd like to suggest maybe up to an hour, although
we're moving. Yeah, so we'll call the half an hour, and we can have an additional half an hour if we need it. So that's under the bylaws. So we have a mover of the Councillor DeGenova's move. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Who is that?
Bly.
Councillor Bly, thank you very much. Okay, so all those in favor, we don't need to vote on screen. All those in favor would vote yay just by voice. All those opposed would say nay. So all in favor say yay.
Yay. Yay.
Okay, all those opposed say nay. Thank you. That's unanimous. And now we'll recess from main council to go back into the in-camera portion for questions around the emergency bylaw. Thank you very much. We're recessed. Okay, Council, so I'm going to reconvene us here in the special council meeting of Thursday, March 19th, 2020. Again, this special council meeting has been called to declare a state of local emergency in accordance with Section 14.5 of the Procedure Bylaw. Additionally, the purpose of this special council meeting is to resolve to grant additional authority under the Emergency Program Act and to amend an adopted motion to repurpose community grants to better support the community's COVID-19 response. Again, we'll be operating the meeting using the queue now. So I do see Councillor DeGenova on the queue, and if you need questions answered, I'd actually ask you to not go on the queue until I've called for you to go on the queue, unless you have a point of privilege or a point of order. So I will advance you, Councillor DeGenova. Just 1 second, though. The special council meeting will be convened by electronic means. So as you can see, council chambers are open, or you can't see, or maybe you can. Council chambers are empty, but I have to convene here just because of the technology, controlling the queues and whatnot. The public is strongly urged to listen to the proceeding via the city's website and follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out on Van City Clerk on Twitter. So the first item of business we have, and then I'll get to the queue before we officially start it. First item we have, item 1, is a declaration of an emergency in the city of Vancouver. We have the following staff here to introduce the item via conference call. Daryl Reed, the fire chief, Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services. Daniel Stevens, the director of emergency management. Francie Connell, the director of legal services and city solicitor. Kelly Oschlager, the assistant director of the Corporate and Legal Services, and Grant Murray, Assistant Director, Administration Legal Services. Under Section 7.2 of the procedure bylaw, council can decide whether or not to hear from speakers at a special council meeting, but there are no speakers currently registered on this item. So this will be just by council with questions to staff. So with that, I'm going to, before I start the briefing, I'm just going to move to Councillor Dejanova and then Councillor Carr if there's a point of order or point of parliamentary procedure. Councillor Dejanova?
Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, this being our first virtual meeting and connecting this way, it's a point of parliamentary procedure.
Sure.
I was prepared to move a motion, and I was wondering if now was the correct time to do that.
One second.
I'm going to move the recommendation.
Yeah, we haven't done a question round yet. It is your a privilege, of course, to move the motion if you'd like. Once you have the floor, but the motion has not yet been moved. Just 1 second, please. I'm going to check with the clerk. Councillor Dejanova, so it is your privilege to move the motion if you'd like. However, there is some interest in having questions. I just inform you, but so please proceed as you'd like.
I understand that we can ask questions through a point of information.
Yes,
and use our time that way. So I really would, considering how imminent this is, and I really appreciate all of the work and time and thoughtfulness that's gone into this, I'd like to move forward with this motion, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay.
And I also had sent an amendment into the clerk and would like to move this as well. And it would be an addition, and it would read, and that, so I'm moving this separately.
But she's
I would like to move it separately.
Okay, so if you're going to move it separately, Councillor Dejanova, what we need first is a seconder to move the motion. And who's seconding?
Councillor Kirby-Young.
Councillor Kirby-Young has seconded. So now, so the round of questions, the introduction of the report and everything has been pushed off by this. However, council can still go on the queue now because we're in debate and decision to ask points of information to myself, other councillors, or staff. So, Councillor Dejanova, you still have the floor.
Thank you. I really just wanted to read the amendment that I'd like to also move separately, so we could discuss them separately if need be, and that council directs staff to prepare and schedule formal briefings to update council at least weekly, as long as this bylaw is enacted.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, Councillor Dejanova. What I have to do is move you to the main queue, but I will put the councillors back in order on the as they appear on the current list. So just bear with me for as clerks do that. Move us over to the main queue, and then of course, if your amendment is seconded, we would move to an amendment queue. So Councillor Dejanova has the floor, clerks, followed by Councillor Carr, and I'm sorry, there was a third councillor on the list. Councillor Dominato. Okay, great. So Councillor Dejanova, you have the, I'm just going to reset timers, so you have the floor for up to 5 minutes. Go ahead.
I just wanted to, first of all, Mr. Mayor, if I could have a point of parliamentary procedure.
Okay. Please go ahead.
My apologies, and it's regarding asking questions under a point of information. It was not my intention anyway to cut other council members off. So, I mean, would it be better form? And I completely wear this and apologize to council. I'd be happy to move forward and rescind putting this motion forward if that's something that council would like instead. I'm sorry, I'm learning how to use the system here. And
Councillor Dejanova, we do have this is a motion that has been moved and seconded, and where we are. So you are moving an amendment.
Okay. Yes, and the amendment, I'll just read it into the record, and that's all I'll say, and I'll allow council to debate it. And again, I just want to apologize to fellow council members.
Yes, please go ahead.
Have a rescission, but it reads that, and the council directs staff to prepare and schedule formal briefings to update council at least weekly, as long as this bylaw is enacted. And that's just formally to offer on record to the public that we're receiving these briefings. I know they may be more frequent than that, and I trust that our staff do brief us and are in touch with us, and really want to commend each and every one of our staff members and know that I'm thinking about them and their families during this difficult time. And really wanted to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the work that you've been doing, your tireless work on this. Also, I can only speak for myself, but happy to help out in any way that staff or yourself see fit. It's unfortunate that it has come to this. It feels surreal, but we are in these times that I couldn't have imagined us being in just a month ago. So thank you for your consideration. And again, I'd like to apologize to council for my misstep in the process here.
Okay, thank you. I need a seconder for this amendment.
Second, Councillor Bly.
Councillor Bly, thanks very much. Now, Council, I'm going to move us over to the amendment queue. So please put yourself on the amendment queue if you...
Mayor, I was on for a point of personal privilege. Adrian Carr, I'm a councillor.
Okay, sure, Councillor Carr.
Yes, I just, my point of personal privilege is that I still do not have a voting screen on, so I will need a vote assist on everything. I can't put myself on.
That's fine, thank you. We will we'll make sure we do that, and if anybody else is having problems, of course, immediately call a point of privilege, and we'll get a vote assist for you. Thanks very much.
I also have a point of parliamentary procedure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, because Councillor Nova jumped the gun, so to speak, in moving this motion, does that mean we will not have the opportunity for the public to hear a presentation by staff?
That is correct.
Is there any way that we can have a presentation by staff in some way now that we are in the debate on the motion? Is there any way that we can do that other than just asking questions of staff through points of information?
Okay, so I'll explain the process to you at this point. We have had the main motion moved and seconded. We are in the debate section. Councillor Councillor Dejanova has forwarded an amendment that has not been seconded. Councillor on the queue, right, I have Councillor Dominato on the amendment, queue to amend the motion. So you can only move a motion to a motion if you have the floor. So right now we are in the queue to discuss the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my point of parliamentary procedure wasn't clearly answered.
Sure, go ahead.
And this is an urgent situation that I believe the public deserves the right to hear staff presenting on this. Is there any way that we can enable staff to present information leading to this particular motion?
At this point, the only way, and Councillor Dejanova has raised this, is to rescind her movement of the motion and to go back to the very beginning of the meeting. But you can only do that if you have the floor, and if that's answered your point of parliamentary procedure, I'll move on to Councillor Dejanova, or Dominato, who has the floor. So, Councillor Dominato, please go ahead. Up to 5 minutes on this amendment.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had a similar question to Councillor Carr, and so I will take myself off the queue, but perhaps there might be a rescindment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova, you have the floor.
Thanks very much again, Mr. Mayor. And thanks, Council, for bearing with me in my missteps. And thanks, Councillor Carr, for pointing that out. As I had noted, as soon as I did that, and it was not my intention not to have a presentation on this. Again, apologies for that, and I would be happy to move a motion to rescind. I know that the amendment hasn't been seconded, so we don't have to deal with that, but I'm happy to move a motion to rescind the recommendations. And again, Council, just wanted to share that it was not my intention to not have that presentation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dejanova.
I'll second the rescission.
Okay, we're not quite there yet, Council. What we have to do first is for Councillor Dejanova, and you do have the floor to withdraw this amendment.
I'd like to withdraw this amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. And then you still have the floor, and you need a seconder to withdraw the amendment.
Seconded for the withdrawal, Councillor Kirby, yes.
Okay, just 1 second, please. Okay, but it wasn't seconded. Oh, okay. So now we need a unanimous motion to withdraw the amendment. So I'm going to call yeas and nays. All in favor, say yay. All opposed, say nay. So all in favor of withdrawing this amendment, say yay.
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 All in favor of, all opposed to withdrawing this amendment, say nay. Okay, thank you. So we've moved off of that. Now I'm going to move back from the amendment queue to the main queue. Councillor Dejanova, you still have a minute left on the main
I
queue.
can't take myself off the queue, Mr. Mayor. I'm not supposed to be on there right now. Thanks.
Okay, so just 1 second, please. I'll stop your clock. Okay, to Councillor Dejanova, if you intend to go back to reset, you're going to have to withdraw your motion to move your initial motion to move.
Mr. Mayor, I understood that I just did. We did withdraw the initial motion.
No,
Is that
it was a different queue, and now that we're back onto the main queue, you'll have to do it again.
I'd like to move to withdraw the recommendations with the intention that they be moved after. And again, I apologize. I think I've already said that once, and that applies to this as well.
Okay, thank you. Need a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. So I'll do yays and nays again. All in favor of withdrawing this motion, say yay.
Yay. Yay.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, Council, so we've withdrawn this motion. I'm going to go back to the question queue, and we have Councillor Dejanova on. Do you have anything else you want to add before we hear the report by staff?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I had always thought maybe it's a point of parliamentary procedure. So if you wouldn't mind maybe stopping my clock, I thought that we did usually hear presentations from staff and then we had an opportunity to ask questions.
Yep, not when you have the floor.
Where I missed that. My apologies.
Okay. So again, the usual procedure here is when you have the floor, you can do whatever you like, and moving a motion would stop the presentation by staff. Anything else, Councillor Dejanova?
Not at this time. I'll put myself back on the queue for afterwards.
Yeah, please. What I'm using the queue for now is for parliamentary privilege, points of order, or points of information. Or sorry, when you have the floor. So actually, anything about points of order or points of privilege would come up now. So unless you have one of those, I'd ask you to stay off the queue. Councillor Dominato, do you have a point of privilege or a point of order?
No, nothing further. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, point of order, point of privilege, point of parliamentary procedure?
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can drop me off there.
Okay, so the queue is now clear, and I'm going to keep it clear until we've heard from staff. So staff, if you'd like to go ahead with your presentation, we'd be happy to hear it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Sadhu Johnston, City Manager, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for giving us a chance to give a quick overview of what we're recommending today. I'm going to just give a quick high-level overview, and then I'm going to ask our Fire Chief, Daryl Reed, to outline why we're asking for this, and I've got Grant here from the Law Department who will talk a little bit about the practicality of how we're proposing to get it done in terms of this actual bylaw. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Mayor?
I can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Great, thanks. So as you're aware, we've been working around the clock. The Emergency Operations Center is up and running, and we have been reviewing the types of issues that we're dealing with, the kinds of circumstances we might need to deal with in the days ahead. We were relieved to hear that the province declared a state of emergency under the Emergency Program Act, which means we don't need to do that, and they can impart those powers upon us. We do feel that there are a number of measures that we may need to undertake in the days ahead that this declaration of a state of emergency in Vancouver enables us to do. And as you'll see in the report, there's really three main areas. The first is for us to be able to use land or property. And when I say acquire, we wouldn't intend to take ownership or expropriate any land. This would be if we needed to use facilities in the community that we would be able to do that. So that could be everything from community centers to hotels and meeting places or other facilities of that nature. and that would be allow us to use them on a temporary basis. The second area is to procure on a first priority basis equipment that we might need, like personal protective equipment, supplies that we might need, or other equipment, and that we would be able to acquire that, procure it on an urgent basis, and that we would be able to gain priority for that. And then the last item on the list here is to give us the ability to restrict, limit, or prohibit through the issuance of written orders the use or occupancy of any premises within the City of Vancouver. This really, if there is an outbreak in a particular part of the city, in a particular facility, and we may need to close businesses or ask businesses to cease operations immediately around that area of outbreak, that this would give us the ability to do that. This is not to be intended to be on a broad scale the entire city. For instance, through a shelter-in-place type of action, that is not enabled with this. Rationing is not enabled with this. What this really enables us to do is to restrict certain activities in businesses as deemed appropriate. So that's really what we're aiming to achieve here. As you know, all parts of our organization are focused on addressing this issue, and we believe these additional powers that would be imparted upon myself, the Deputy City Manager Paul Mokry, or the Fire Chief Daryl Reed would enable us to act in an urgent fashion to take on these additional powers. We would intend to brief council on a regular basis if we believed we needed to ramp up or take additional measures. We would come back to council in order to do that, and we of course have been engaging with the province and Vancouver Coastal Health, BC Housing, and many other partners, and so we might need to use these powers in support of requests that they have for additional demands for healthcare, shelter, childcare, or other uses. So that's a quick overview of what we're doing here, and I'd like to hand it over to Daryl Reed to give you a little overview in terms of from his perspective on why we're asking for these additional powers, and build off of the points that I've made. Daryl?
Hi, so Daryl Reed here, Fire Chief, also General Manager of the Vancouver Emergency Management Agency, and my goal is to provide information as to why we would be making this request. First off, we want Vancouver's COVID-19 response to be faster, more nimble, and more responsive to changes in information that are available than has been happening to date. We feel that this bylaw gives us additional powers beyond the provincial declaration that would enable faster decision-making and faster actions to be taken. The benefits of that being that not only keeping Vancouver safer, but also keeping essential service staff, frontline staff, and first responders working in Vancouver safer. Some of the pieces of the bylaw, you can imagine that the ability to access facilities or land for purposes such as shelters, childcare, or meeting requests by Vancouver Coastal Health to address their surge capacity or other issues could be beneficial. The ability to procure on a first priority basis goods or services required to enable our response or to help us cope with the emergency, not only for the public, but also some equipment and supplies required for first response and frontline work. And then the ability to enable more proactive steps being taken to assist with social distancing. So those are some of the reasons, but it's largely about that nimbleness and that ability to respond quickly to new information and changes.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daryl. So ask our representative from the Law Department, Grant, to give you just a little sense of why we're not pursuing this under the Emergency Program Act, but rather are pursuing it through the Charter. So I'll ask Grant to jump in.
Hi, it's Grant Murray with Legal Services. As Sadhu mentioned, the province has declared an emergency under the Emergency Program Act, and that may result in some additional powers for the city, although it's unclear as to what those are at this time. As a result of that, and because this is considered by many to be an emergency, we have recommended that the city enact a bylaw pursuant to Section 173 of the Vancouver Charter. That is a special section that no other local government in the province enjoys, and it authorizes us to declare an emergency, or the council to declare an emergency, by a 2/3 vote, and where the powers conferred on council are inadequate, they can declare the emergency and exercise the powers necessary to deal effectively with the emergency. The Emergency Program Act did authorize a declaration of a local emergency, but pursuant to that act, that authority may now be gone. And so we felt that it was best that this be done on something that was absolutely solid and not somewhat questionable under the Emergency Program Act. That's essentially our recommendation, and as Sadhu and Daryl have pointed out, we're asking for 3 particular powers at this stage. The bylaw could be amended in the future if certain things are required by council or determined by council that are necessary, but at the moment we're trying to keep this to a limited set of powers that appear to us to be imminently required. And that's it.
Mr. Mayor, that's a quick overview from the staff. Short presentation there. Hope that addressed the key points that might be on your minds, and informing the public of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And just to close out by saying we believe that these powers will enable us to respond as the situation evolves. And, we are, as an organization, on guard. We're working diligently to ensure that we're protecting our workers and the public, while continuing to serve as the essential services that we provide to the community: policing and fire, water, sewers, sanitation. And our business continuity plans are up and running. We are doing what we can to ensure that we can continue to provide those services. And we believe that the powers outlined in this bylaw, should council approve them, would enable us to be prepared to respond in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, staff, for the excellent presentation. So now I'm going to open up the question queue. Councillors have up to 5 minutes, and I see Councillor Dominato on the queue. At the end of the questions, or whenever council would like to, someone will move this motion. So, Councillor Dominato, please go ahead with your questions up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope everyone can hear me all right. And thank you to staff for the presentation and just clarifying the different roles in terms of what was declared yesterday with the province and what's being proposed today. I did want to follow up because I think it is top of mind, or we're seeing in U.S. cities move towards shelter in place, as well as either that's undertaken already or it's being contemplated. And I'm just wondering if staff could expand on conversations that we're having with the province in this regard, and whether we anticipate something might come provincially around that, and just what stage we're at.
Yeah, this is Sadhu, City Manager. I do have a group of about 40 city managers across North America that I'm engaging with on an hourly basis to learn what they're going through, and some have pursued orders of that nature, either on the municipal, regional, or larger scales. That is not something that we are contemplating. This bylaw wouldn't give us those powers. We would be looking to the direction from our health authorities for that type of direction, and if we were to pursue that, which again we're not recommending at this point, we would be looking to come back to council. And it's not clear to me at this point where the province is at on this issue. I imagine that they're exploring it. We have been engaging through the Emergency Operations Center with the province. We're often not privy to the decisions that they are making in terms of, they are thinking province-wide and acting as such. And so there are unique situations that come up in Vancouver, which is why we're looking for these particular powers. But at this point, we are not hearing that they are looking to pursue that type of action at this point. Anything to add, Daryl?
Yeah, I would say that, however, we are planning for it as a possible contingency or a possible outcome in the future, so that we're ready for it at the City of Vancouver should it arise as the strategy.
Okay, so thank you. I appreciate that. And just a follow-up question in a different vein is just with the provisions that are recommended in this bylaw, do you, and I guess it's probably more directed to Chief Reid in particular, heading up the emergency management, do you feel satisfied that this provides sufficient powers to act nimbly, as you're saying and suggesting?
Yeah, so this is a really good set of powers for the issues immediately at hand. And I think that the next stage of powers that might be added are the types of powers that are going to require consultation with elected officials, with mayor and council, to make sure that we all understand what they mean to the city of Vancouver. So this is the right start.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for the overview. My question is really what relates to what message residents should take away from this. And I wonder if you could confirm if you think it's fair that this signals that the City of Vancouver is prepared, if necessary, to take decisive and quick and bold action to keep residents safe, and that we should view this as a proactive planning step, that we're willing to move quickly because that's shown to flatten the curve where it makes sense, and that this is a proactive step to ensure that the capability is in place, and that residents should view this as a positive and not something to worry about, but that is sort of the mindset through which this state of emergency is being sought. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, Councillor, this is Sadhu. That's a fair characterization. We are, as you know, all hands on deck here, and we are working very closely with Vancouver Coastal Health, Emergency Management BC, and BC Housing. And these measures will enable us, we believe, to provide the support that they might need in setting up healthcare shelters or other essential services in the city. These are this is a proactive step. It's very important that people continue to heed the guidance of the provincial health officer, Bonnie Henry, as well as our chief medical officer here, Patty Daly, and pursue the social distancing and the other measures that they're outlining. We, as an organization, are working to deploy that in our organization. These measures enable us to act in a nimble way, as the fire chief had outlined, if and when we need to.
So residents should feel reassured that we're taking all possible steps, and this is part of that process.
We do see this as part of that process.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, on to Councillor Hardwick. Up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for all of this. Question is about term. There's no end date on this bylaw. When we get past this, what would be involved within the bylaw, or what would be next steps?
It's Grant Murray from Legal Services. The bylaw could be repealed at a meeting of council. It could be called in the same manner. The meeting could be called in the same manner as this meeting was called, electronically, and it could be done that way. The bylaw does not have a time limit in it at the moment, but again, we're not aware of when this is likely to end. That's one of the actual advantages of a declaration under Section 173 of the Vancouver Charter, is that it doesn't terminate automatically or doesn't come up for cancellation on a weekly basis, as is the case of a declaration of a state of local emergency under the Emergency Program Act. But Council could call an emergency meeting and repeal it tomorrow if that was required.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, two questions. The first is, does this give us the power to prevent evictions? And if not, what can we do in that direction? And the second is to the manager and the fire chief. I'm just wondering what your assessment is of how important it is to the whole city, as well as to people who are in shelters, homeless people, and people in SROs, that these folks have the ability to isolate.
This is Sadhu, city manager. I can hit the first question, and then I'll ask Daryl on the self-isolation. At this point, we believe that the better jurisdictional interpretation is evictions are under the provincial jurisdiction. So we are looking to and engaging with the province around that question. I know many people are asking that. We are looking at our own charter authority and whether that's something that we could pursue at this point. We are not recommending to do that under the Vancouver Charter, but it's something we're looking to see whether we can do. And then the second question regarding shelters, I'll hand over to Daryl.
So it's good for the safety and health of the entire city if all people and in all communities within Vancouver are able to self-isolate. So it's our hope that this bylaw will actually enable us to do that in a more expedient fashion.
Is that okay, Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bly.
Thank you very much, and for staff's work ongoing in this at this time. I actually wanted to ask a question regarding. Appreciate this bylaw to declare a state of emergency in Vancouver is to support everybody that lives in the city, but particularly the 10,000 vulnerable people that live in our city. And I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if you could share with us your ongoing conversations with the federal government as it relates to the powers that the city would have if this state of emergency were to pass today.
Go ahead, Sadi.
I thought the question was directed to the mayor. Did I misunderstand you, Councillor?
No, the question was directed to the mayor. Ongoing conversations happening with the federal government that this bylaw passing today would help us achieve whatever it is that we need to do in order to support our most vulnerable residents in the city right now.
Right. I had lots of local conversations with nonprofit providers, with the chief of police, with, of course, our emergency team. As well as we've had discussions with the province as how this is going to work. But I was directed directly by the Deputy Prime Minister to say take all actions necessary. And that's why I've called this meeting and asked staff to put this together because I think this gives us the authority we need to take all actions necessary at this moment. So I'm following the direction of the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, on this, as well as talking to provincial counterparts. So this is what we need at this point. And of course, if we need more, then I would directly come back to council in the same manner.
Okay, thank you very much for that. One follow-up question is regarding business in the city, our ongoing small business. You know, we're walking a very fine line between small business, larger businesses, and how to address concerns of employees going to work and what is sort of essential and non-essential. I wonder if you can provide, Mr. Mayor, any direction to the community in light of this state of emergency passing, what may or may not happen as a result when it comes to the business community.
Right, so we've been trying to provide daily updates and including many media, going on media a lot, basically following the provincial health orders to say that all bars and restaurants are closed. If businesses do not think they can have adequate physical distance for their customers, then they shouldn't open. However, restaurants that can do takeout and delivery, that's fine as long as their staff are safe. However, we're collecting information on a daily basis, and if that's not enough, then these measures help us go even further. We're trying to, really, I have conference calls most days with all kinds of folks around the city, different collections of people, asking them exactly what they need, and so taking direction from them. At the same time, the direction of the public health officials is really the most important direction we can get at this point. So I'm also working with them on a daily basis. And if the public health officials think we need to move further, this would give us the power we need to move ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And one quick follow-up question. We're looking at addressing a lot of our immediate need around housing as it relates to those precariously housed and those that cannot self-isolate based on their housing situation. We're also in the midst of an opioid crisis, and I wonder, looking at 3B in the bylaw, it talks about medical supplies. I wonder if there's been any dialogue around our concerns, of course, with those suffering in this opioid crisis and how this could help them, if at all.
Right. Thanks for asking a question. I'm not exactly sure how that would affect our ability. Perhaps legal can provide some information. However, on the broader conversations, my first conversation with Deputy Prime Minister Freeland was to urge relaxation of federal health requirements to allow for safe supply, and we also know that the province has taken the same direction. I have raised this directly with Minister Dix, and depending on when we get finished this business, I have a call back with him this afternoon where I'll raise this again. So perhaps legal can address, if you can in any way, how this would allow us to address this, and quickly, because we're at the end of 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is Sadhu, City Manager. At this point, this will not, the measures outlined in here will not impact safe supply. This is, obviously, we're not in a position to procure drugs or distribute them as an organization that's outside of our jurisdiction, and we would be relying on federal and provincial governments to support people in these situations. It's outside of our scope, and it's outside of this bylaw.
Yeah, and it probably could refer to, though, protective equipment for frontline workers would be more than pharmaceuticals. So I'll go on to Councillor Boyle.
Point of personal privilege.
Councillor Carr?
Yes, thank you. My whole computer is now dead. They were trying to fix the voting screen, and so I'm going to have to interrupt. I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
To get the speakers list at any time, and I'll continue to need voter assist. Okay. So could you put the list? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll do that, and I'll add you to this speakers list. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, and most of my questions were asked by my colleagues. I appreciate that. I just wanted to hear a bit more about what our communication plans would be in light of possibly declaring a state of emergency. And I know we've heard from small businesses about how to be communicating the situation in their locations. I hear concerns from residents who see lots of other people out not social distancing. So I'm wondering what avenues and tools the city has to communicate what this means for people's lives and further amplify the public health messages that
okay.
we've been getting.
Thanks very much. I'll turn it over to the city manager, and perhaps you can mention what we're doing at the Woodwards building, for example.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we, as you know, we have signage that we have produced and put at various facilities across the city and are making available online. I think signage is a primary way that we'll be doing this. We have a partnership with the SRO Collaborative, and they are distributing posters and brochures throughout the SROs in the downtown east side. We obviously we'll continue to rely on our health authority partners for the messages, and we can amplify them. We will continue to use the tools that we've been using throughout this crisis so far, both online press conferences multiple times a week, and then with the efforts on postering. Anything else, Darryl?
No, I think the backdrop to the message becomes that we're being proactive, and there are some important messages for the public to pay attention and what we're trying to be proactive about. So the messaging about social distancing will be stronger with that to make sure that people really understand the seriousness of the situation at hand and why we're asking for it, why we're recommending it.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, Councillor Boyle?
Yeah, thanks for those answers. I'm also wondering what staff could speak to in terms of how people might feel this in their lives. If we declare a state of emergency, are there things the public can expect to see shifts? Are there actions the city can speak to it would be doing differently immediately?
Yeah, this is Sadhu, City Manager. As I've said a couple times, and we really are continuing to rely on the health authorities to be providing the primary guidance around what efforts we need to undertake. We are seeing that we may need access to facilities, for instance, for sheltering or other needs. And so us having the ability to gain access to them, for instance, community centers or meeting rooms, that kind of thing, and procuring equipment. Overall, this measure and the bylaw that's being recommended today will not have a visible impact on the community at large. This gives us the tools as the administration, as the city, to implement measures on a nimble basis. It isn't a kind of a wide sweeping measure that will change the entire city. We're really looking for those types of measures to be pursued in partnership with the health authorities and under their guidance. This gives us the tools that we need to implement specific recommendations coming out of the Emergency Operations Center.
Is that? Sorry, Councillor Boyle, is that good?
Yes, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Weave. Up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, you talked about if we go forward with this, is there any opportunity to look at the taxation permits, the need to balance the city's budget? Are there tools in place here financially that we can utilize by this declaration to support small businesses, organizations, and operators?
Go ahead, City Manager.
Yep, thanks. This is Sadhu. No, there are not at this point. We, as you know, through the Vancouver Economic Commission and through our partnership with the BIAs, have been engaging with the business community to understand what their needs are, what their requests are. As you are aware, our own financial situation as an organization will be very, very strained by this. And we recognize the business community is obviously strained. We're envisioning that the $82 billion stimulus package that the federal government has announced will be the primary way that individuals and businesses get the support that they need to get through this crisis. Our focus as an organization right now is to maintain our essential services, to make sure when you turn on a tap that there's water coming out, to make sure when there's a fire that we have firefighters that are there to fight it. That we are doing what we can to support the health agencies, BC Housing, to support vulnerable populations. So right now, we're all hands on deck keeping our own organization going and to make sure that we're able to do that as this emergency continues to unfold. So our business continuity plans and the measures that we will implement from a financial perspective, we need to make sure that we remain viable and solvent as an organization, and that we are able to provide the essential services that our residents and businesses rely upon, and that really remains our primary focus at this point.
Okay. Second question, on the written orders for the restriction limited participation of businesses, are we going to be giving written orders to all the bars and restaurants and everyone that we have put restrictions in place so that there's clarity so that the ones are open have gotten the signage from the city, so it's really clear that they are against the current actions that the city is looking for?
Thanks. This is Sadhu. I think what we would be doing is, again, we are having our own staffing challenges, as you know, and likely will as this continues to evolve. We would likely be pursuing this on a case-by-case basis. There are businesses that are in direct contravention of the directives. We would likely be going to those businesses and providing an order rather than providing orders to all businesses across the entire city in one go.
Okay, and third component is kind of on our proactive approach. Do we have communication going out on where people can go, what businesses should they continue to support, how that can be done? And also you talked about using facilities or rooms to rent out or turn into certain spaces. Do we have a proactive approach where we're asking community centers and we're asking businesses if they have space that could be available instead of utilizing our powers to take space? Are we looking proactively around the city to find space that would work for us?
Yeah, firstly, I mean, I think generally our approach would be to, we are working to be proactive. We are responding to our task force with BC Housing and Vancouver Coastal Health in terms of what their needs might be and where they might be. And so we're not putting out a general call for everybody to offer facilities. We're trying to really understand what their needs might be for that surge capacity that the fire chief was talking about, and in areas where they might need it. And once we identify the need for something, we will obviously work in a partner-oriented way with that organization. And so we would envision using these powers as a last resort, but at least we know we have them. in case we need them, and we would certainly intend to work collaboratively with the organizations that we're asking for support from, rather than starting out with the powers outlined in this bylaw.
And last question, with this kind of growing sentiment that we're moving towards an emergency in the city of Vancouver, are we looking at trying to find volunteer networks to really be able to spread the messaging if it gets to be a different level? So strata managers, business managers, operators, so that we can amplify our voice when it might get more critical to do so.
Maybe I'll ask the fire chief if he wants to jump on that.
Hey, just 10 seconds, please.
Sure. In the immediate future, we will be looking at how to advise volunteer groups, and some of them will self-form because of the nature of this event, in how to spread the message and support vulnerable populations and help seniors and all those things.
Thanks very much. On to Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, and I apologize if these questions, some of them have been asked as I was trying to get my computer up and running with staff.
Yep, go ahead.
My first question is one of the reasons why it is important to move on this state of emergency, the lack of compliance regarding the BC's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Henry's request that bars and restaurants downtown voluntarily not open on St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you, Councillor Carr, and I'll take this staff, is that yes, we did work with with Minister Dix, BC Health Officer, as well as the BCH Health Officer, to get the closure for St. Patrick's Day, and then eventually extended to the whole city. I did ask the VPD to monitor that, not to intervene, but to monitor, and they found over 20 businesses that were opened. And so that's what prompted me to ask staff to move forward with this, and why we had the meeting today. But since that point, I have heard of multiple accounts of people gathering in large groups, businesses not operating as they should, and so this gives us the power to take it a step further if we pass it today.
And just to confirm, I'm looking for affirmation that to really restrict community passing on of the virus, we really need to restrict that kind of personal contact, correct?
Absolutely. There's two keys to this crisis at the moment. The first is to stop the spread of infection and to flatten the curve, but the second is to make sure the economic viability of the city and all the residents and businesses here. And so we're trying to strike a balance, and that's why we thought this was necessary for to stop the spread of the infection, while at the same time, if we have to take other measures, we'll be coming back to council for any larger decisions.
My understanding, Mr. Mayor, is that this kind of a declaration of a state of emergency, it does position the city to be able to request reimbursement of funds from senior governments for the work we need to do to keep our city safe and the people in it safe, and our local businesses going. Would this declaration enable us to, for example, potentially aid small businesses, and in the end be able to apply to recoup those costs from senior governments?
Perhaps I'll refer to the legal team in terms of the providing funding. In terms of recouping, that's really up to the senior governments. We are, constantly examining the finances here at the city and looking for what requests we need. But we do have now an emergency fund from the federal government of $160 million. If we get out of this work soon enough, I have a call with the providers of that funding to distribute across the city and across the region. So that really, this is by negotiation essentially. So I wouldn't say there's anything in this order that helps facilitate that. It is really a negotiation with the senior levels. And over to legal in terms of the provision of money to small businesses, etc.
Yeah, this is Sadhu. I'll just jump in. Because the declaration of a state of emergency, we are we are tracking our expenses, and we are able to ask for some reimbursement from the province. And so, we will be pursuing that as this is ongoing. obviously closing all of our community centers, all programming, there's very significant financial losses due to lost revenue from golf courses and other facilities. So, we are seeing an impact there. This bylaw does not include any financial incentives to business. As I think the Charter precludes us from providing financial incentives to business or support to business. So that's not something that we would be looking to pursue at this time, but it is something that we are making recommendations based on the input we're getting through the Vancouver Economic Commission. We are shaping recommendations and sharing them with other municipalities in the Lower Mainland here so that we can have a common voice to the federal and provincial governments around what types of incentives our business community might need from the $82 billion financial stimulus package that the federal government have announced.
Great. I don't know how much time I have.
You've got just 10 seconds. So
that's not enough time for a question. Thank you so much for the answer.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dejanova and then Councillor Swanson.
Thanks very much. Just a few questions for staff, and it's more of a process question, but I've been asked by the public about the military, and if the military in Vancouver, I know that there are reserve bases in Vancouver, if they get involved in aid or helping out as well, and if our staff had any recommendations, if that goes directly through the federal government, or in specific times such as these, do those requests go through the Department of National Defense? So I was hoping there might be some comment on that.
Thanks, Councillor Dejanova. I'll just take that question. I have spoken directly with the Canada's Defence Minister and about this. He actually reached out to me to let me know what resources are available, but that is a federal decision. I know the Prime Minister has talked about the Emergency Measures Act, but we would have no direction under this order to have anything to do with the with the military. That would come from a request by me and then a decision from senior officials.
Oh, thanks so much. Just a follow-up question to that, Mr. Mayor, and perhaps you'd like to address this. I was talking directly about sort of the local, I guess the local community in Vancouver. We have a number of different armories, and there's the Beatty Street Drill Hall, as well as the Seaforth. I was just wondering if to follow up to a previous question asked, in looking at ways to connect, if without a full complement, if there was any way to involve them in sort of some of the communications out, or for that to be utilized in any way. I understand that a military response, which was not what I was suggesting, is a separate question, but is there any way to try and include them without such measures as the Emergency Measures Act?
Yeah, this is Sadhu. I'm going to ask the fire chief to respond.
Yeah, there's a really clear decision-making process, and the mayor alluded to it, but it's a federal decision for all military resources. And in other significant disasters that I've been involved in leadership roles in, the process to engage the military is very formal and laid out. So we're not there yet here.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate
Just before we go ahead with your second question, I do need a motion to extend past noon, and I would suggest we extend until we've completed this item, and then take a brief recess, and then come back and do the second item. So could I have a motion to extend past? Seconder?
Councillor Dejanova.
Right. I'll ask for yeas and nays again then. So all in favor of extending until we finish this item, say yay.
Yay. Yay.
Okay, all opposed say nay. Okay, thank you. So that's passed unanimously. Go ahead, Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks so much. So my second question is a follow-up on Councillor Carr's question about those establishments that didn't close. I'm wondering if, what are we doing to make sure that we at the Vancouver level, I know that our staff are doing an excellent job of communicating on social media, but is there any indication that maybe there wasn't understanding or wide understanding of the order and what has been coming down from Provincial Health Services and Dr. Bonnie Henry?
Sorry, who's that addressed to?
Staff. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I guess as we look across the world, I mean, there's people down in Florida that are partying on the beach. There's definitely some people aren't taking this seriously, and that is obviously to our collective peril. This bylaw enables us to pursue businesses that are not following those orders by enabling us to provide written orders and to reduce or eliminate their occupancy of those premises. So the proposed bylaw before you enables us to be more proactive for the businesses that may continue to operate against the direction of the authorities.
Thanks very much. And one last quick question in my last minute here is a question regarding goods and services and transportation of those goods and services. I understand non-essential travel has been closed at the U.S. borders and Canadian land borders. That's been the announcement in the media. I know that there was an announcement made by the federal government as well, and the provincial government has called for that. Could staff perhaps provide some information now or in follow-up as to what that means? Does that mean that goods can get back and forth, like commercial goods, things that we need here that come across the U.S. border?
It's my understanding that the limitations on the border haven't been implemented yet. I think it's tomorrow evening, or that it's still under development. But my understanding is that goods will continue to be able to be delivered across the border, and supply chains are being maintained. So food and goods, whatnot, can obviously, if that's the case, continue to flow across the borders.
Thanks very much. Councillor Swanson.
Yes, I'm just wondering if staff can tell us how long it would take for us to move to a shelter-in-place regime if it was decided that that was necessary. And have staff discussed with the folks at VCH and other health people what would cause them to recommend this?
Yeah, this is Sadhu, and I'll ask Daryl to jump in too, as he deems appropriate. If something like that were to be called by the health authorities, that's something that they could call to be immediate, or they could decide that they could give people notice. That's obviously would be at their discretion, and it could be immediate. It's not something that is enabled or contemplated in the bylaw that is before you. And at this point, we don't have insight into the process that the province is going through in considering their next steps.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor Wiebe, I think you did have a. Did you have a round on this one? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I did, and I was just wondering if we would like to move the recommendation.
I'm just going to call to move. So, are you moving the motion?
Yes, I am, as recommended.
Thank you very much. We have a seconder.
Second, Councillor Dominato.
Councillor Dominato, thank you. Okay, we're over to the main queue, which I'm going to clear now. So we're on the main queue. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. And now we're on to the main queue for debate and decision. Councillor Dejanova, up to 5 minutes. Councillor Dejanova, up to 5 minutes.
Sorry, can you hear me? There we go. Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move forward the amendment that I had sent in earlier.
Okay.
And that amendment reads, and it's just an addition, and I've explained it before, and it says, and the council directs staff to prepare and schedule formal briefings to update council at least weekly as long as this bylaw is enacted. And just speaking to that, I know that our staff do an excellent job in updating us. I've really appreciated all of the updates. I appreciate the long hours and that it takes away from some of the time that they can spend working on this to update us, and really do appreciate the response. I also have people reaching out in the community to me, and perhaps other council members do as well, asking how often are we updated? And I think that this just offers, that formally, that's what that would be. It could be a few times a day, depending on where the situation's at. It could be once a week, or it could be more somewhere in between. But for that reason, I'd just like to add this and hoping that this is something we can move forward with. But very much also just wanted to speak to this, complementing the overall motion. And I think that it is important that we move as fast as we can to take the immediate steps to make sure that we're contributing in a way that shows that we're here not only for people who live and work in Vancouver, but for the public on a local scale, but also considering what's going on at the global level. I think it's really important that we all stay informed and are moving together in the same direction. And I just want to thank each and every one of you, my fellow council members, for the different questions and ideas and thoughts that have come in. I think it's been really helpful to hear from that.
Great. Do we have a seconder?
Thank you. Second, Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you, Councillor Hardwick. So we're on the amendment queue now. Clear the queue. Does anybody want to speak to this amendment? Councillor Fry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor DeGenova. I'm prepared to support this amendment. I do want to highlight, and I appreciate all the time that we've taken to go over this, both in camera and then repeating a lot of those questions again for the benefit of the public. I do think that there's some important kind of moving forward steps that we need to see happen through this. In particular, I'm really concerned about the evictions component, and I'd like to have some assurances through this regular check-in that will be something that we're looking at in the event that the province or the feds aren't coming through in a timely enough manner, and also through the delivery of things like food security. I'm hearing from a lot of community centers where folks are very concerned about the combination of social distancing and their own challenges that they're not getting access to some of the food security programs that we've had in the past. I'm really hopeful that we're continuing to have these regular updates, despite the fact that we've been doing an amazing job of getting regular updates from our hardworking staff. But I am supportive of this amendment. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Councillor Carr.
Great, thank you so much. I first of all, I just want to say I appreciate so much the fact that we have been briefed regularly, and in fact, it's much more frequently than just a week or within a week. Sometimes it's every day or every second day, and that is and the response to our questions. So just a real kudos to staff for the briefings that you have provided. I don't see a harm in this. I think it's going on anyway, but it certainly makes it clear to the public that we are getting the briefing. So I will support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and likewise, I will support the amendment. It obviously puts in place a minimum requirement of updates, but I do want to acknowledge as well is that we have been updated on a daily basis at this point in terms of the sort of evolving changes around the response to COVID-19. I want to thank staff for that. Also acknowledging that we as councillors are also feeding into this response as we're hearing from different members of the public, from stakeholder groups, sector groups around emerging concerns for them, and that we're playing a role in that response as well. And I see that continuing, and I also see and would expect that we're being nimble as well, is because things can change overnight. And so there will be times, and I think staff are responsive to that, where we're going to have to convene on a conference call first thing in the morning as a situation may evolve, or there's a need to come back together and initiate something further. So appreciate the amendment, but I think it's just about being nimble, transparent, and keeping the dialogue flowing and working together. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks so much. Just wanted to close on this and thank staff. And again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your staff for the frequent updates. In no way was this to say that we were not getting updates, and we don't know how long this bylaw will be enacted. It's really hard to determine that, and I think that's one of the reasons we're here to discuss the overall motion. But I really just wanted to say to the staff that are a part of the presentation today, to the police chief, to our fire chief, to each and every staff member who's contributing right now to making sure the city continues to run and offers not only certainty, but I think what I've heard from residents is that it offers comfort to them. to know that things are moving forward, that there are frequent updates. And I just wanted to say, my thoughts go out to each and every staff member who is leaving their home to come to work, and also to their families. So I really wanted to state that, and I also I'm hoping that we can learn more through these briefings. And again, I think that formal briefings are one thing, but I do want to really acknowledge, as others have, that this is in no means is because we're not getting updates. I commend staff on the updates and the communication they've had with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it. We've had it moved and seconded, so we'll call a vote on this now. Councillor Carr, I realize you need a vote assist, so I'll just let people settle in and vote here on the amendment to the motion.
It's Councillor Kirby. I also need a vote assist point of privilege, please.
Okay, and how are we doing that, Clerk? Right. Okay, so you're going to have to vote verbally. Start with Councillor Kirby-Young.
In favor.
Okay, Councillor Carr?
In favor.
Great. Okay, so that's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to the main queue. Councillor Dejanova, do you have anything else to add?
Not at this time. I just, again, I think I've said it in the amendment, really appreciate what our city staff are doing. And it's very surreal to me, the times that we're in. I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, that you have been tirelessly working with provincial and federal levels of government, and I don't see this as being different and moving in a different direction. I see this as moving in the same direction, which is what we have to do. We may have to separate ourselves by a meter to two, but I'm hoping that we're all moving in the same direction, and that's what I see. And really just want to state my thanks and my appreciation, and the fact that I'm very aware and alive to the fact that our staff leave their families every day, and there's considerations right now. I do see people in our city who are used to coming together and being close. I see our cultural communities. I see it throughout our city that there are hearts that are breaking right now over the fact that people can't come together. But we're doing this to make sure that we can move forward together. So thank you very much, and appreciate this recommendation and all of the information that staff have provided while working every day tirelessly 24/7 on this. So thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I am going to support this main motion wholeheartedly, and I really also want to thank all the staff for the incredible work that's being done, not just frontline staff, but I think staff throughout all our operations. And those people within the city who really are taking seriously the orders by, not the orders, but the requests of the Chief Medical Officer of BC and also our own regional Chief Medical Officer to really do social distancing, which is so important in stopping the spread and slowing the spread of this virus. I also want to note that this motion does come at the urging of Chief Reid, who is the head of our Emergency Operations Center, and I take his advice wholeheartedly to move on this as a necessity, recognizing that voluntary requests were not voluntarily complied with, and that specifically on St. Patrick's Day and the businesses that stayed open does put at risk people, and it's our responsibility to protect people and to ensure that the risks to them are minimal. So I'm really pleased to support this because I think it is an incredibly important move for the health and well-being of people. And I really appreciate, Mr. Mayor, the work you're doing federally and provincially through the Mayor's Caucus, regionally, also through the Big City Mayor's Caucus, through your conversations with the ministers at the federal and the provincial level to ensure that the real needs of Vancouver are being forwarded as they prepare various kinds of compensation packages and support packages
not only now, right now, in the sort of immediacy of the crisis that we're in, but I'm also expecting over the longer term in terms of economic recovery and the ways in which we can re-stimulate the economy, especially to handle not only this emergency, but in line with handling the emergencies of homelessness and affordable housing and the climate crisis. And I think we can tackle them together as we move forward over the longer term.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. So I think if we're going to err, it should be on the side of caution. And this motion gives us a little more power to take action, to get the supplies we need to acquire buildings for people who need housing and shelter and care. We desperately need this power to acquire buildings. We have about 10,000 vulnerable people in SROs, in shelters and on the streets. And the SROs don't have individual bathrooms. And these people have no ability to shelter in place. We also need a safe supply of drugs for people who use substances. And I'm hoping we can use this emergency power to get some hotels with bathrooms who are in shelters and homeless. We also desperately need eviction protection. If Doug Ford can do it, I don't see why John Horgan can't. But if he doesn't do it before the 1st of April, I think we should definitely try expanding our city emergency power so we can prevent evictions in Vancouver. And I just wanted to end by thanking all the city staff and also all the people who are working in healthcare, in nonprofits, in grocery stores, on the bus. Stay safe, everyone, and take care of each other.
Thank you, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And briefly, thank you to our staff who've been undertaking, I think, working around the clock. I think that it's fair to say that, we're dealing with a public health emergency and that there's a lot of anxiety out there. People have been using the term unprecedented. And, I think that at all levels of government are trying to respond to the best of their ability. And I'm very appreciative of the leadership we've seen provincially and federally as well. And so I think that just for the public's, understanding is that we are taking this seriously as a city. I think that's demonstrated in the actions to date, and we all have a role to play, and we're trying to do our part here. And I think that having our head of emergency management response, Chief Reid, saying that these are measures, the powers that are proposed in the bylaw will allow staff to be more nimble, to be more responsive in terms of accessing facilities as needed, procurement and so on. I'm very supportive of that and recognizing there may be some other powers under the provincial state of emergency that were called yesterday that we may be able to tap into. But I think that we're here dealing just simply with this bylaw today. As I raised in my questions, I look forward to further information through staff and through you, Mayor, with the dialogue that happens provincially and federally, but particularly provincially around shelter in place and whether that's a necessity. That's come up a few times as we're seeing other cities move in that direction. Appreciate also the concerns around identifying, and I gather staff are working on this, places for people who need to self-isolate and that don't have a place, that we're looking at means to address that. And also, I think it's been raised a few times about concerns about our small businesses, in particular our service industry, that are having to close in the midst of COVID-19. And recognizing that we are looking to the federal government and province around what may be available to support those businesses, but I also look forward to the information that we're gathering through VEC from our different stakeholder groups and different sector groups, and getting their input and what are some measures at the civic level, at the municipal level, that we might undertake to maybe give some flexibility to small businesses. Because I think for me, while I know we're in the midst of emergency response now, I'm thinking ahead to the recovery phase and how do we help those small businesses along going forward? How do we help our residents adjust? How do we get back to some sense of normalcy? And the sort of planning and thinking that will go into that as well. And again, recognizing the bylaw doesn't deal with that today, but it does afford us some measures to address the response at this time. So I support the bylaw, and I just wanted to reflect those thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Weep.
Yes, I'm just happy to move this forward as we show strong leadership here at the City of Vancouver. But I do think this is going to be a start of a long process. We have a lot of work to do to really clarify the messaging to the public on how and what we can support with our businesses. And it's not just our businesses now, it's all the people that have been laid off over this past week. I think we really need to recognize that employment insurance will not be enough for them to be paying rent at the end of this month. The landlords are in uncertainty. I think businesses are in uncertainty, and the public. And so I think there's a lot of work for us to do to advocate to ensure that the people right now that are struggling to understand how they're going to put food on the table or pay rent at the end of the month really get taken care of. And so I think this is just a start. I really appreciate all staff's work and the mayor on really kind of moving forward as quickly as possible to show leadership. And now I think it's time for us to really figure out how we can support the clarity of the messaging to every person in Vancouver, as well as every business, and also ensure that we're providing the supports as quickly as possible in this time of uncertainty. I really appreciate everyone's work on this.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you. I'll be brief because I hope we can do this quickly and let staff get back to the COVID response, because I realize that there's a lot to be done. I just want to make a couple of comments for the public, and that is really that I want them to walk away with the perspective that the City of Vancouver is not afraid to take bold actions to keep its residents safe, that the City of Vancouver recognizes the tremendous impact that this is having on people and their livelihoods, and people's mental health and well-being, that people have a lot of questions, and it's an unprecedented time and everybody's working together. I'm incredibly appreciative of all the medical personnel and the frontline responders, but I do want to say that I think this is one step. And when we look at the other jurisdictions around the world, the one learn.
Oh, I think I've lost you there, Councillor Kirby-Young.
All of the recommendations from health officials with social distancing, and that it can multiply and get much worse much more quickly if we're not bold and we're not proactive, which is what we're talking about here today. I think this is one step. I think that we need to be very clear that the City of Vancouver is not afraid to take bigger and bolder steps, recognizing that there's going to be short-term pain, but it is for the greater good, and that may involve a shelter-in-place option at the right time. But I want people to recognize that the council isn't afraid to do that, and that we have to learn from the other jurisdictions that have gone before us and not think that it's different here or we're somehow managing it differently. It isn't. We're simply at a different point and a different phase here, and we have the advantage of having those learnings, and so we should take advantage of that and take these bold steps to keep everybody safe. So for that reason, I support the motion, and I do recognize that the City of Vancouver may have to take further steps, and if we do that, we're doing that for the right reasons, to keep everybody safe and hopefully get back to normality as quickly as we can, although we know that this will extend over a period of time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Boyle, you're the last on the list.
Okay, thanks. I'll just echo some of my colleagues in saying that I think this is an incredibly important step that reflects how seriously the City of Vancouver is taking this pandemic. One thing that's been made really clear in this pandemic is how much we rely on one another, and in this moment it's clear that means relying on one another to maintain social distance while every level of government acts urgently in the common good. So I also wanted to name that while the city is working urgently to support residents and particularly appreciate the focus on our most vulnerable residents, residents across the city have been engaging in efforts to support one another, and we've seen those popping up online and in all sorts of ways, and it's incredible and meaningful to be seeing that happen in what we know is an emergency, as we've seen in other places as it ramps up. So I'm happy to support this step and to continue working, all of us together as the situation evolves, to ensure that we're protecting public health and well-being for residents across our city and beyond.
Thank you very much. That's it on the list then, Council. So I'm going to call a vote on this motion. So I know Councillor Kirby and Councillor Carr have to have vote assist, so I'll ask Councillor Carr, are you in favor of this motion?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young, are you in favor of this motion?
In favor. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And that's unanimous, Council. So we have passed the state of emergency. Council, we are going to take a recess, and I'm going to give everybody a break. I'll let you know that I have a number of urgent calls and meetings I have to preside over this starting very, very soon, including with funding sources from the federal and provincial government. So I am going to turn the chair over to Councillor Dejanova, who is in the building here in her office. So I ask that we reconvene at 1 p.m. and then when we do, we will, yes, and then you'll be chaired by Councillor and Dejanova. If you want to. Councillor Kirby-Young, I know you can't queue up, so I think I hear your voice there.
Yeah, point of privilege. I'm wondering, with the will of council, if council be willing to extend to continue the business, because I believe it will be short and allow staff to get back to the COVID response instead of taking a break. That could be a motion. However, council, this meeting has not been short this morning. I mean, we have been going for over 3 hours, so if I have to be called away to talk to a senior federal minister, I'm going to turn the chair over to Councillor Dejanova if I have to leave. So at this point, entertain a motion by Councillor Kirby-Young to extend to finish the second item of business. Do we have a seconder? Okay, thank you. Second.
Okay, so all in favor will say yay, and all opposed will say nay. So all in favor?
Yay. Yay. Yay.
Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
Okay, we have one opposed, so that was Councillor Dejanova opposed. Yeah, there's no opportunity to speak here.
Okay, yeah. That means no break. Yes, thank you.
So you're yay, so it's unanimous, Councillor Dejanova?
I thought we were voting on a break, Mr. Mayor, so if we're voting to extend, I'll just abstain, which would count as a yay.
Okay, thank you. So we are extending now. We're moving to the second point of business, which is the amendments to community service grants to allow community response to COVID-19. I'm not sure, City Manager, if we have Sandra Singh, the General Manager, on the line. Is she there?
Oh, hi there. Sorry. Just turning off the mute. Yes. Mr. Mayor and Council, Sadhu here, and Sandra as well. And we're happy to give you an overview if that would be helpful, or just answer questions.
Right. I would opt myself just for questions, but if Council, I'll move it to a report if a single councillor wants it. So is everybody okay with moving ahead without a presentation? Please say yay. Everybody.
Yay.
Anybody not okay with that, please say nay. Okay, thank you. So we'll move to questions then. Councillor Wiebe, I have you on the queue. Please go ahead.
No questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dominato, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. Just understand that the intent here is to expedite the grants, social service grants. Curious if it will be, is it clear to the grant recipients that these are the funds, there's not any additional funds. So if they choose to use those funds for COVID response, are they expecting any additional funds in addition to what was already allocated by council? I guess I'm looking for some clarification on that, and I have a second question.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. Sandra Singh, General Manager, Arts, Culture and Community Services. So, yes, Councillor, if this is approved by Council, then in our communications with our grant recipients, we will make that very clear.
Thank you. Second question, Councillor Dominato.
Yeah, and related to that then, because I think it's really important to outset those expectations for people, is that will we be getting, in light of the shifting situation and the impact on our budget, will we be getting a quarterly operating budget? I'm not saying right now, but in the next couple of months, to give us a sense of where we're at, given the loss of revenues and given that we still have grants that we've dedicated and allocated and things like that.
Yeah, this is Sadhu, City Manager. We do a quarterly budget report for council, and my expectation would be, as we get a handle on the financial implications of this, we would do reporting to council outside of the standard quarterly budget reports. And we're going to work to understand the implications, and we're going to need to deploy measures to reduce our costs. And we'll be in discussions with council as we look at the options, and we're going to be looking for council's feedback on that. So, yep, we will be engaging as we start to get a handle on it.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I certainly don't want to take up much more time after the amount of time on the emergency motion earlier. I'm curious, though, do we have a game plan in place for how, with a lot of the community center closures, how we're going to deploy a lot of these resources with these grants, and as far as best practices for physical distancing, and how are we integrating these so that we're keeping people safe while deploying these funds?
So Councillor, these grants are going out to the various. We're proposing that with this redeployment of with this permission being granted, if approved, to nonprofit organizations, each organization within its service community and within its services will make decisions about their services and responses in line with public health direction. So that could be something that we explicitly state in the communication with them, is that our expectation is that they are following public health guidelines. But in terms of the hundreds of organizations that these grants impact, it's not at this point our intention of kind of directing at their service level how they're operating.
Sure. Could we, though, add some kind of condition to ensure that they are, just even a follow-up note to advise that this is the direction we'd like them to pursue, and as almost a legal sort of context?
Well, in terms of their work with their communities, in terms of their work with their communities, I mean, I think what we can do is we can in the correspondence with these organizations, confirm for them that our expectation is that they are following the public health guidelines. I'd have to take away. Let me take away, and we'll think about it if the council approves this in our implementation. How we might want to word that expectation strongly, if that's all right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering if you know if these nonprofits that are getting grants are able to get the supplies and the protective gear and stuff they need for the response. Are they able to get gloves and hand sanitizer and things like that?
So we know that there are a number of different discussions happening around access to supplies, such as hand sanitizer and gloves. At this point, for the nonprofit sector as a whole, we don't have a city strategy in terms of supplying these types of resources to nonprofits. We are in discussions specifically within the context of downtown east side nonprofits, the core supplies that are needed to support the community. But across the wide range of social organizations that these grants and the renter services grants that this report represents, no, at this point we do not. We're anticipating that every organization is seeking to understand their own supply needs at this point and address them where they can.
Okay, maybe this emergency declaration could help with that a little bit too, in terms of acquiring supplies. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, Council. That's it for questions. Can I have somebody move the motion? I have. Okay.
I'm on the queue.
Okay, thank you. I'll move over to the main queue once I have a seconder. Second? I heard Councillor Hardwick's name, so Councillor Hardwick, I've got you on now. I've got the on the main queue for debate and decision. Councillor DeGenova, up to 5 minutes.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, I again want to thank our staff for working with many of, I want to call them community partners, because these are organizations that really are not only grassroots, but they're also at the front lines here. And I think that it's important that we do what we can to support them in these times. And I hope that this will also show to provincial and federal levels of government that if these organizations have similar grants at those levels of government, that the same types of provisions will be made for them. So for that reason, I wholeheartedly support this and will be voting in favor.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else in the queue, so if I can call a vote on this, please vote. I'm going to be asking Councillor Carr for a vote assist. Are you in favor of this motion?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young?
In favor.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm looking at Councillor Bly. We're still waiting for your vote. Did you need a vote assist? Okay, that's, no, we've got it. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, Council. Let's see. So I guess we have a motion to adjourn now. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Thanks. So I'm going to call yeas and nays again. All in favor say yay.
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 Any opposed say no. A nay. Okay, thank you very much, Council. Great work today. This has been really, extraordinary in many, many ways. Thanks for all the support, and we'll be, of course, updating you, daily as we can. And thanks again for this, and thanks to all the staff, and especially here in the clerk's office that made this happen. So thanks, Council, and we'll talk to you again very shortly.